The archive was on fire. Typical. If there was one thing the universe was good at, besides producing endless varieties of space garbage and bureaucracy, it was setting important stuff on fire. Thalric, psychic soldier extraordinaire, stood in the middle of what was once the bastion of human knowledge, now reduced to a glorified oven. He scratched his stubbly chin, watching the flames lick greedily at the ceiling. "Should have asked for transfer to the water department," he muttered. "What's that, boss?" came a voice from behind, rough and thick with sarcasm. It was Kira, the squad's self-appointed comedian and occasional murder enthusiast. She was leaning against a crumbling pillar, smudges of dust and ash blending into her already dubious uniform. "Just thinking how nice it'd be to be dealing with something that doesn't want to kill us for a change," Thalric replied, turning his head slightly to give her a sidelong glance. Something exploded with a resounding crash somewhere in the vicinity. "Then again, who doesn't love a good barbecue?" Kira snorted, raising an eyebrow. "You mean besides vegetarians and people with a sense of self-preservation? Forget about self-preservation. We're humans, remember. We're here to remind everyone how annoying we are by not dying like we're supposed to." Thalric waved a hand towards the chaos, the gesture encompassing the wreckage and the carnage it had left in its wake. The archive, in all its burning glory, was situated on the planet Argus 9, the galactic equivalent of a library card that got access to some of the universe's darkest secrets. Secrets that had apparently upset a few too many people, or beings to be precise, and now it was payback time. Thalric's squad, the infamous Dead Enders, were here not because they were the best, but because they were the last line of defense against the technocracy's advancing forces. And like any good last line, they were stretched thinner than a promise from a used starship salesman. A sharp whine ripped through the air as laser fire skittered across the walls, leaving smoldering scars in the concrete. "Incoming!" someone shouted, as if it wasn't already obvious. "Yeah, no shit," grumbled Jax, the squad's resident cynic and munitions expert, who was currently attempting to jury-rig a defense turret with what looked like a toaster and a few questionable wires. "Why do they always shoot at us?" "Because we're the good guys," Jax, Kira answered, ducking as another volley whizzed overhead. "And everyone knows good guys make the best target practice." "Right, good guys," Jax said, his voice dry as a Martian desert. "If by good guys you mean the ones too stupid to run away." In front of him the turret sparked to life. It was a miracle, like watching a chicken lay an egg made of dynamite. "I think it works," he added with a grin that was more feral than friendly. "Let's hope it doesn't explode in our faces," Thalric said, although at this point a little explosion might be a welcome distraction. Across the room, Myrna, the squad's medic who had the bedside manner of a wet rag, was busy applying bandages to a soldier who looked more dead than alive. "Hold still," she snapped as he winced. "I'm a healer, not a miracle worker. Can't you be both?" the soldier whined, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sure, and I'll grow wings and fly us out of here," Myrna shot back, tightening the bandage with a bit more force than necessary. "Now shut up and let me do my job before you bleed all over my clean floor." Thalric took a moment to survey the scene, his mind racing with possibilities, each more desperate than the last. The enemy's methodical approach was crushing their defenses like a sledgehammer through a paper wall. And yet, the humans had one thing going for them that their technologically superior foes didn't: unpredictability. And a knack for making the best out of the worst situations. "We need a plan," Thalric announced, stepping over debris that had once been a desk. "Preferably one that doesn't end with us as charred corpses." Jack snorted, finishing his work on the turret. "Good luck with that. We're a little short on miracles today." Kira shrugged, fiddling with a grenade that looked a bit too homemade for comfort. "We could always throw a party. Invite the technocracy over for tea and biscuits. Maybe they'll get bored and leave. Or we could blow them up," Myrna suggested, appearing beside them with her hands on her hips. "Quicker, less chit-chat and I'm fresh out of biscuits." Thalric rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of leadership settling on his shoulders like a particularly angry gorilla. "All right, listen up," he said, gathering the squad with a commanding gesture. "We're going to play to our strengths. They think we're predictable. Let's show them just how wrong they are." He laid out a plan, one that involved more improvised explosives, a lot of running, and just enough insanity to give them a fighting chance. As he spoke, he could see the spark of hope igniting in their eyes. It was faint, more like a sputter than a flame, but it was there. Maybe, just maybe, they could pull this off. "You know," Jack said with a wry grin as they prepared to move out, "if we survive this, I'm going to take up gardening. Much safer. Dirt doesn't shoot back." Kira laughed, slapping him on the back. "I'll believe it when I see it. You're about as likely to grow flowers as I am to become a nun." "Hey, never say never," Thalric interjected, checking his weapon. "Stranger things have happened. Like us actually winning this fight." The squad moved with a purpose now, a ragtag band of misfits thrown together by fate and held together by sheer stubbornness. They were humanity's last hope, or at least the last humans crazy enough to still be fighting. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid scent of burnt metal as they pushed forward, weapons primed and instincts honed. As they advanced through the crumbling corridors, dodging falling debris and the occasional burst of enemy fire, Thalric couldn't help but reflect on the absurdity of their situation. Here they were, a small band of humans, standing against an army that could wipe them out with a flick of a switch. But that was the thing about humans. They didn't know when to quit. They didn't know how to quit. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The firefight intensified as they reached the main hall, a cavernous space filled with the echoes of gunfire and shouted orders. The technocracy's forces were advancing, their metallic forms gleaming in the dim light. "Looks like they brought the whole family," Kira observed, her voice tinged with dark amusement. "And here I forgot to send a thank you card," Thalric replied, taking cover behind a pillar as shots rang out. Jax was already at work, setting up his makeshift turret in a strategic position. "Let's give them a warm welcome," he said with a grin that promised nothing good for their enemies. The barrage of firepower was relentless, but the dead enders were nothing if not resourceful. They ducked and dodged, returning fire with a ferocity born of desperation and a touch of madness. Thalric's psychic abilities flared to life, a tingling sensation that danced along his nerves. He reached out with his mind, feeling the edges of the enemy's consciousness, probing for weaknesses. "Hey, metalheads," he called out, focusing his mental energy. "Catch!" With a burst of psychic force, he sent a shockwave through the enemy ranks, causing their systems to glitch and falter. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give his squad the opening they needed. Kira seized the moment, lobbing her homemade grenade into the midst of the chaos. "Special delivery," she shouted as the explosion rocked the hall, sending debris and enemy soldiers flying. Myrna was already moving, her medical supplies forgotten as she joined the fray with a pistol in each hand. "Time to earn our keep," she said, her voice grim but determined. Jax, meanwhile, manned the turret, his fingers flying over the controls as he unleashed a hail of bullets. "Come on, you bastards," he muttered, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of the fight. "Let's see how you like this." The tide was turning, but Thalric knew better than to get complacent. The technocracy wasn't going to give up easily, and there was still a long way to go. But for now, they were holding their ground, and for a ragtag group of human survivors, that was victory enough. Thalric glanced around at his squad, their faces smeared with soot and determination. They were battered, bruised, and blooded, but they were still standing. And as long as they were standing, there was hope. "Keep pushing," he shouted over the din, his voice carrying the weight of command and conviction. "We can do this. We have to do this." The battle raged on, a chaotic symphony of gunfire and screams, but in the midst of it all, Thalric found himself smiling. Maybe they were outmatched. Maybe they were outnumbered. But they were human, damn it. And that meant they were never out of the fight. As the enemy regrouped for another assault, Thalric steeled himself, ready to lead his squad into the fray once more. The universe might be vast and uncaring, but humanity was here to stay. And if the technocracy wanted their archive, they'd have to pry it from their cold, dead hands. "Bring it on," Thowrick muttered, his voice a low growl. "We're not done yet." The fire was spreading through the archive like a librarian's worst nightmare on steroids, which was saying something considering the librarian was an alien with 6 eyes and a penchant for world-ending secrets. Thowrick surveyed the chaotic scene, wondering if today was finally the day they'd become crispy critters. The universe was generous with its poetic justice. Die reading, die burning. "You smell that?" Kira asked, wrinkling her nose as they hurried down a scorched hallway. "Yeah, that's the smell of desperation, burnt hair, and alien conspiracy," Thowrick replied. With a hint of toasted hope, they skidded to a halt before a heavily reinforced door, the kind that screamed, "Keep out, secrets here." Jax, ever the handyman, was already fiddling with the control panel. "If I cross the wrong wires, think it'll just lock us out or blow us up," he mused, flipping a switch that turned the air a shade of ozone. "Let's aim for lockout," Kira suggested, leaning casually against the wall. "I'm not ready to become a splatter painting." With a final grunt, Jax disengaged the lock and the door hissed open, revealing what looked like a library crossed with a mad scientist's lab. The room was crammed with shelves groaning under the weight of dusty tomes, glowing data cubes, and a collection of alien gizmos that could be either weapons or egg beaters. In the center of the chaos stood archivist Quarren, a creature that resembled a giant mantis with a wardrobe borrowed from a cyberpunk circus. Its mandibles clicked together as it regarded them with something between curiosity and annoyance. "Ah, the humans," Quarren said, its voice a strange blend of static and sarcasm. "I wondered when you'd show up to the party, uninvited as usual." "We're not here for the hors d'oeuvres," Thowrick said, stepping forward. "We need your help." Quarren's eyes, all 6 of them, narrowed. "And why would I help you? Last time I checked, your species was more fond of breaking things than fixing them." "Hey, that's not fair," Kira interjected. "We're pretty good at fixing things. We just like to break them first to see how they work." And Thowrick added, "We have something you need." "Oh," the archivist's antennae twitched with interest. "And what might that be?" "Us," Thowrick answered simply. "We're unpredictable. You know the technocracy inside out, but they know you too. They don't know us." Quarren seemed to ponder this, its clawed limbs tapping a rhythm on the floor. "Unpredictable, yes, but also unreliable. Tell me, why should I trust you with the knowledge I guard?" Thowrick exchanged a glance with Kira, who shrugged. "Trust's a funny thing, isn't it?" she said. "Like insurance. Costs a lot, doesn't always pay off, sometimes leaves you high and dry." "True," Quarren conceded. "And yet here we stand, my precious archive ablaze because of your kind." "Hey, you're the one who handed out secrets like they were candy at Halloween," Jax pointed out. "We're just here to clean up the mess." Quarren's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "Very well, I'll consider it. But first, a demonstration of worth is in order. There's a vault deeper in the archive containing information vital to your cause. Retrieve it and maybe I'll entertain the notion of cooperation." Kira groaned. "Great, a fetch quest. Just what we needed." "Think of it as a team-building exercise," Thowrick said, motioning for the group to follow. Nothing bonds people together like potential death. They navigated the labyrinthine corridors of the archive, dodging falling beams and bursts of flame. Every step felt like an eternity, the oppressive heat a constant reminder that procrastination was not an option. "So, what's in this vault?" Kira asked, wiping sweat from her brow. "Hopefully not more fire," Jax quipped. Thowrick felt the vault's psychic presence before they saw it, a pulsing, thrumming energy that danced at the edges of his mind. "We're close," he said, nodding toward a staircase leading down. The vault door was an imposing slab of metal, covered in alien runes that glowed ominously. "Looks like we need to crack this open," Jax said, inspecting the lock. "Anyone got a giant can opener?" "Move aside," Thowrick said, focusing his energy. Channeling his psychic abilities, he visualized the locking mechanism, feeling its complexity, a puzzle waiting to be solved or shattered. With a concentrated effort, he sent a mental pulse through the lock, and the door shuddered, then slid open with a reluctant groan. Inside lay rows of data cubes, each one a repository of secrets. "Bingo," Kira breathed, stepping inside. "Grab what we can and get out," Thalric instructed, pocketing a handful of cubes. "Before this place turns into an oven." They worked quickly, each gathering as much as they could carry. The weight of the cubes was more than physical. It was the weight of responsibility, of a potential future snatched from the jaws of destruction. "Let's move," Thalric ordered, turning back the way they'd come. The heat was more intense now, the flames licking closer, hungrier. "So, Thalric," Kira said as they ran, "what's the plan if Quarren doesn't play nice?" "We'll improvise," he replied. "It's what we're best at." "And if this is all pointless?" Jax asked. "Then we'll go out in a blaze of glory," emphasis on blaze. They returned to the main hall where Quarren awaited, its expression inscrutable. "You have the data?" it asked. "Right here," Thalric confirmed, holding up the cubes. "Now you gonna help us, or do we get to watch this place go up like a festive bonfire?" Quarren's antennae twitched again, a gesture of reluctant acquiescence. "Very well, humans, you have shown initiative and resolve, qualities I find intriguing." "Intriguing enough to get you to join the losing side?" Kira asked. "Intriguing enough to consider it," Quarren replied. "But know this, failure is not an option. The consequences of this knowledge falling into the wrong hands are dire. Dire's our middle name," Jax deadpanned, "and our first and last sometimes." With a nod, Quarren gestured toward a secondary exit. "Follow me. I will guide you to a safe passage out of here." "Safe is relative," Thalric muttered, motioning for the squad to follow. They moved through the archive's burning remains, Quarren leading the way with a confidence born from knowing the stakes. The flames cast flickering shadows, turning the corridors into a surreal dance of light and dark. "So, what's the deal with these cubes?" Kira asked, adjusting her grip on her haul. "Each contains vital strategic data on the technocracy," Quarren explained. "Locations, weaknesses, even potential allies they have not yet subjugated." "Sounds like a cheat sheet," Jax commented. "In a manner of speaking," Quarren replied. "But a cheat sheet that must be used wisely, lest it lead to greater calamity." "You really know how to sell it," Thalric said, his tone dry. "So what's the catch?" "The catch, human, is that the technocracy will stop at nothing to get it back," Quarren said, a note of warning in its voice. "You have bought yourselves time, but nothing more." "Time's all we need," Thalric replied. "We'll make sure it counts." They reached the exit, a hatch leading out into the cold vacuum of space. Quarren activated the controls and the hatch opened, revealing the dark expanse beyond. "There's a transport vessel nearby," Quarren said. "It will take you to safety if you can manage not to crash it." "No promises," Jax said, flashing a grin. "We've got a thing for close calls." Quarren hesitated, its gaze lingering on them. "I have never understood your species," it said finally. "But perhaps that is why you have endured." "Endurance is just stubbornness with a good PR team," Kira quipped. "Indeed," Quarren said, almost as if smiling. "Go now and may your peculiar brand of chaos bring you success." With a final nod, Thalric led his squad through the hatch, the weight of their mission pressing down like the cold void. Behind them, the archive continued to burn, a testament to knowledge lost and perhaps, someday, found. As they drifted toward the waiting vessel, Thalric glanced back at the archive, his mind a swirl of uncertainty and determination. They had no guarantees, no assurances, just a fragile alliance with an alien who had as many secrets as they did. But they had their wits, their resourcefulness, and the unshakable belief that they could pull off anything, even the impossible. "Well, Thalric," Jax said, breaking the silence, "what's next?" "Next, we do what we always do," Thalric replied, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "We wing it." "Good plan," Kira said, settling into the pilot's seat with a mock salute. "I've always liked plans with no plan." As the vessel powered up, its engines humming with potential, Thalric allowed himself a moment of optimism. It was reckless, probably ill-advised, but it was also undeniably human, and that more than anything was their greatest weapon. "Let's see where this ride takes us," he said, confidence edged with mischief. After all, what could possibly go wrong? With that, the vessel shot forward, a streak of rebellion against the vast, uncaring universe. The dead enders were far from finished, and with a little luck, a lot of luck, they'd live to fight another day. The vessel hummed along, a floating tin can powered by the hopes and prayers of a crew who probably had a few more sins than successes to their names. Thalric adjusted the settings on the navigation console, squinting at the blinking lights as if they might suddenly arrange themselves into something that resembled an easy answer. No such luck. Beside him, Kira was doing her best impression of someone who knew what all the buttons did. It was like watching a cat stare at a Rubik's Cube, fascinating, but you knew there was no happy ending there. "How do we know this thing's not gonna explode?" she asked, only half joking. "We don't," Thalric replied, as if stating the obvious was a personal hobby. "But if it does, at least it'll be quick, might even leave a pretty light show." "A fireworks finale," Jax chimed in from the back, still clinging to the last shreds of his humor like a man holding onto a fraying rope. "Never had a problem with a dramatic exit." Thalric let out a sigh, the kind that carried the weight of too many botched plans and nearly botched lives. "Let's focus on keeping this thing in one piece, shall we?" Kira gave him a thumbs up, her eyes scanning the controls like she hoped they'd start speaking basic any second now. "I'll do my best to make sure we only crash if it's absolutely necessary." "That's the spirit," Thalric muttered, not entirely convinced. He glanced at the glowing data cubes they'd secured, their promise of crucial intel shining like tiny beacons of hope or doom, depending on your level of optimism. It wasn't long before the peace of their dubious escape was shattered. The vessel's comm system crackled to life, and an all-too-familiar voice slithered through the static. It was as charming as a snake oil salesman caught with a broken nose. "Ah, dead enders, we meet again." Thalric's scowl deepened. "Luskar," he said, recognizing the technocracy enforcer's voice. "I thought we left you in our dust." "Wishful thinking," Luskar replied, the smugness practically dripping through the speakers. "You've been quite the thorn in our side, but I think it's time we trim the shrubbery." "How about you try trimming that ego first?" Kira shot back, not missing a beat. Luskar's laugh was like nails on a chalkboard. "Charming as ever, Kira, but I'm afraid your time's up. We've deployed psychic dampeners in your sector. Should be feeling the effects right about now." Kira exchanged a glance with Thalric, a silent, mutual "oh crap" passing between them as the ship shuddered. It felt like someone had thrown a wet blanket over his mind, heavy, suffocating, and distinctly unpleasant. Thalric clenched his fists, trying to push through the fog that clouded his thoughts. "Feels like someone turned off the lights upstairs," Jax commented, rubbing his temples. "I don't like it. Those dampeners are designed to nullify psychic abilities," Thalric explained, as if delivering a weather report. "Which is bad news for us." "No kidding," Kira said, her voice sharp. "So, what's the plan, genius?" Thalric forced himself to think, pushing back against the mental sludge. "We reroute the energy," he said, the idea forming like a spark in the dark. "Use the dampener's energy against them." Jax raised an eyebrow. "And how exactly do we do that without turning ourselves into toasters?" Thalric shrugged, trying to exude a confidence that felt paper thin. "We improvise." "It's what we do best, right?" "You keep saying that," Kira muttered, "but it's starting to sound less like a plan and more like an excuse." Ignoring her, Thalric moved to the control panel, his fingers dancing over the keys. "We need to harness the dampener's energy," he said, more to himself than anyone else. "Feed it back into the system as a power boost." "And here I thought we were just going to pray," Jax said, peering over Thalric's shoulder. "I like this plan better." Kira swiveled in her seat, her eyes narrowing. "You sure you're not just going to fry us all?" "Pretty sure," Thalric replied, though he doubted his own words. "Well, slightly sure." "Reassuring," Kira deadpanned. "All right, what's the first step?" Thalric paused, feeling a clarity cutting through the fog like a knife. "Jax, I need you on the engine room's manual override. Redirect the power flow to the main system console." Jax nodded, pushing off with a grim determination. "On it." Just keep the ship from falling apart long enough for me to do my thing. As Jax disappeared into the bowels of the ship, Thalric turned to Kira. Get ready to adjust the stabilizers. We might get a little boost in speed once we reroute the energy. Kira gave a mock salute. Stabilizers ready to stabilize. Thalric's fingers flew across the console, rerouting wires, adjusting frequencies, anything to channel the oppressive energy into something useful. Every second felt like a countdown to disaster, but he couldn't afford to dwell on that. "How's it going back there, Jax?" Thalric called into the comm. "Like a charm," Jax replied, the sound of clattering tools echoing through the line. "If by charm you mean a headache waiting to happen, but we're almost there." The ship groaned ominously, as if protesting the sudden shift in energy. For a moment, Thalric feared they'd pushed it too far, that they'd go out in a blaze of not-so-glorious failure. But then, like the universe deciding to throw them a bone, the ship surged forward, powered by the very dampeners meant to cripple them. The oppressive weight on Thalric's mind lifted, replaced by a rush of adrenaline. "Stabilizers engaged," Kira announced, her voice a mix of relief and excitement. "Looks like we're not dead yet." "Yet being the operative word," Thalric said, allowing himself a brief smile. "Now let's get the hell out of here before they figure out we've turned their weapon into our ride." As the ship barreled through the dark expanse, Luskar's voice crackled back through the comms, a hint of irritation creeping into his otherwise smooth facade. "Impressive, Thalric, but don't think you've won. We'll find you eventually." Thalric chuckled, a low sound filled with defiance. "You can try. But we've got a little thing called human ingenuity on our side. It's a real bitch to deal with." Kira cut the comms with a snap, shooting Thalric a grin. "Not bad for a guy who makes up plans on the fly." "Don't get used to it," Thalric replied, though there was a warmth in his words. "I'm only a genius every other Tuesday." Jax returned to the cockpit, grease-stained but grinning like a man who'd just cheated death and enjoyed every second of it. "Well, that was fun. Can we do it again?" "Pass," Kira said, rolling her eyes. "Once is more than enough for me." With the immediate threat behind them, the tension ebbed, leaving a comfortable silence in its wake. For now, they had their lives, their freedom, and a ship running on borrowed time. It was more than they'd had an hour ago, and for Thalric, that was enough. "Don't look now," Jax said, leaning back in his seat. "But I think we're getting the hang of this whole not dying thing." Thalric nodded, his gaze fixed on the stars ahead. "Let's just hope our luck holds out." "I'd rather not test it too often," Kira chuckled, a sound filled with the kind of reckless optimism that had gotten them this far. "Luck's just a word for people who can't admit they're brilliant." "Or stubborn," Jax added, stretching his arms with a satisfying crack. "I vote for stubborn." As the vessel sailed through the vast, uncaring void, Thalric couldn't shake the feeling that they'd been given another chance. A chance to make something of the madness they'd been thrust into. It wouldn't be easy, and it sure as hell wouldn't be safe, but what in life worth doing ever was? "What's next on our piss-off the technocracy tour?" Kira asked, turning to Thalric with an expectant look. He shrugged, a gesture that felt like a declaration of intent. "We wing it, just like we always do." With that, the crew settled into the rhythm of the journey, their path uncertain, their future written in the stars they aimed to defy. Whatever came next, Thalric knew they'd face it head-on, with a grin, a quip, and a stubborn refusal to back down. After all, if they were going to go down, they might as well do it in style. The faint hum of the vessel's engines was the closest thing to a lullaby the dead enders would ever get. The stars zipped by outside as if the universe itself was trying to wave them off, like a parent with a problem child. Inside, the cockpit was a hive of tense activity as Thalric, Kira, and Jax took stock of their situation. It was like trying to do a jigsaw puzzle while sitting on a roller coaster, but hey, that was their idea of a good time. Thalric was busy frowning at a control panel that seemed to delight in flashing random colors at him. "This thing is like a carnival ride from hell," he muttered, trying to adjust the settings. "I swear it's got a mind of its own." "That's comforting," Kira quipped, tapping at the navigation console as if it might respond to the universal language of percussive maintenance. "We really need some luck, Thalric." Thalric gave her a sideways glance. "Luck's for gamblers and idiots. We've got something better. Desperation." "Desperation is just luck with a hangover," Jax pointed out with a grin, leaning back in his chair like he owned the place. His laid-back demeanor would have been calming if it weren't for the fact that he seemed a little too at home with chaos. "But hey, if we crash and burn, at least we'll do it in style." The comm system crackled again, interrupting what could generously be called a strategy session. It was that familiar scratchy tone, like a radio buzzing with a bad connection. All eyes turned to the speaker as the static resolved into words. "Dead enders," said Archivist Quarren, the alien mantis with fashion sense that would make a cyberpunk melt, his voice like silk rubbed against sandpaper. "I've been monitoring your predicament. Quite the impressive display of escaping certain death." Thalric allowed himself a moment of pride before the cynicism kicked back in. "Thanks, Quarren." "We aim to misbehave and survive, sometimes in that order." Quarren's mandibles clicked as he continued. "Your unconventional tactics have piqued my interest. I would like to offer assistance." Jax sat up straighter, his interest visibly sparked. "What kind of assistance are we talking about? Please tell me it involves cake." Quarren paused, clearly not versed in human humor or cake cravings. "I possess access to an ancient archive map. It contains forgotten routes that may aid your escape." "Sounds too good to be true," Kira said cautiously, peering at Thalric for his take. Thalric scratched his chin, a gesture that had become second nature whenever something reeked of a trap. "What do you get out of this, Quarren?" "An exercise in mutual interest. The technocracy's overreach threatens us all. Assisting you undermines their efforts." "Fair enough," Thalric said, nodding. "Where do we get this map?" "I will transmit it now," Quarren replied, almost as if he'd anticipated the question before it was asked. The console beeped as data began to flood in, the files glowing with the promise of survival or disaster. As if on cue, the comm system crackled to life again, but this time it wasn't Quarren. Luskar's voice oozed through like a bad memory. "Intercepting communications, are we? Naughty, naughty." Kira rolled her eyes, her fingers dancing over the console as she tried to outpace whatever Luskar was cooking up. "Does this guy have nothing better to do than stalk us?" "Sounds like he's got a bit of a crush," Jax offered, his cheeky grin never faltering. "Maybe we should send him a thank you note or a restraining order." Thalric was already moving, his mind racing alongside the ship. "We've got to move fast. Luskar's going to throw everything he's got at us now." Quarren interrupted, tone urgent. "The routes are being targeted. If you wish to escape, you must act now." "Of course," Thalric muttered. "Because nothing says urgent like impending doom." Kira punched in the coordinates for the nearest escape route from the map. "Are we trusting the giant bug in cyberpunk clothing?" "Trust might be pushing it," Thalric admitted, "but we don't have a lot of options. Jax, get ready to boost the engines. We're gonna need all the speed we can get." Jax was already on it, fingers flying over the controls with a kind of manic glee. "Boosting engines. Let's see if we can't outrun our problems for once." The ship lurched forward, the stars outside stretching into lines as they accelerated. It was the kind of all-or-nothing gamble that had been the hallmark of Thalric's life, not exactly reassuring but familiar. "You think we'll make it?" Kira asked, her eyes fixed on the course laid out in front of them. "I think we've got a fighting chance," Thalric replied, which was the most optimistic thing he could muster. "And that's more than we've had in a while." The vessel charged through the void, the hum of its engines now a roar as it hurtled towards the escape route. The map provided by Quarren unfolded in real time, guiding them through a maze of spatial slipstreams and gravitational anomalies that the technocracy had seemingly forgotten. As the ship danced through the stars, Thalric couldn't help but think of all the times they'd slipped the noose before, each escape more improbable than the last. He'd have to thank Quarren if they ever got out of this mess alive. Maybe send him a nice cybernetic bouquet. But before any gratitude could be planned, Luskar's threats turned into action. The comms erupted with warnings as technocracy cruisers dropped out of hyperspace behind them, weapons hot and ready for a chase. "Looks like they're not letting us go without a fight," Jack said, his voice laced with excitement instead of fear. "This is gonna be fun." A console beeped with the urgency only a computer could muster. "Shields up," Thowrick barked, already anticipating the barrage that was surely coming. The vessel shuddered as the first shots glanced off the shields, the impacts resonating through the cockpit like a drumbeat. It was a reminder that death was only a misstep away, always waiting in the wings with bated breath. Kira grit her teeth, adjusting the stabilizers to keep them on course. "I hope you're not planning on crash landing us just yet." "Not unless it's absolutely necessary," Thowrick replied, a smirk tugging at his lips despite himself. "Besides, I'd hate to ruin the ship before we've had a chance to redecorate." As they wove through the maze of stars, the technocracy cruisers tried to close the distance, their pursuit relentless. But Quarren's map was a thing of beauty, leading them through warp points and hidden corridors of space that offered brief reprieves from the onslaught. "How are we doing back there, Jax?" Thowrick called over the chaos. Jax's voice crackled through the comms, carrying a mixture of frustration and exhilaration. "Engines holding for now, but they are giving us a hell of a run for our money. Maybe we should charge them for the privilege." Thowrick chuckled, though there was little humor in it. "I'll let you handle billing once we've survived." "Priorities, you know." Kira's focus was laser-sharp, her fingers a blur of motion as she fought to keep them on course. "We've got another slipstream coming up. If we hit it just right, we might be able to shake them." "Might is a wonderful word," Jax noted from his station. "Covers a multitude of sins." Thowrick tightened his grip on the controls, his mind racing with possibilities. "Let's make it more than might. We're not losing this game of hide-and-seek to a bunch of tech-obsessed maniacs." As they approached the slipstream, the ship shuddered again under the barrage of enemy fire. The shields were holding, but only just. With every hit, Thowrick could feel the fabric of their survival stretching thinner and thinner. "Here goes nothing," Kira muttered, her voice a steady anchor in the storm. She punched the controls, guiding the ship into the slipstream with a precision that spoke of equal parts skill and desperation. The vessel lurched, the stars blurring into streaks as they were propelled forward with a force that pinned them to their seats. It was the kind of maneuver that didn't leave room for error, the kind that separated the living from the burned-out wreckage. "Hold on," Thowrick shouted, though it was more of a suggestion than a command at this point. As the slipstream carried them through the spatial labyrinth, the comms flared to life one last time. Luskar's voice cut through the static, a final taunt riding the waves of space. "Run while you can, dead enders. This isn't over." "We're counting on it," Thowrick replied, his words crackling with defiance. He cut the comms, ending the conversation with a finality that felt almost cathartic. The slipstream spat them out on the other side of the spatial maze, leaving the technocracy cruisers trailing in their wake. The starry expanse stretched out before them, a reminder that space was as vast as it was indifferent. For a moment, silence reigned in the cockpit, each member of the crew catching their breath from the marathon sprint through danger and death. "Well," Jax said after a beat, breaking the silence with a grin, "I'd say that deserves a drink, or three." Kira let out a relieved laugh, the sound carrying a mix of triumph and disbelief. "I can't believe we pulled that off." "Believe it," Thowrick replied, his voice steady with the calm that came after the storm. "But let's not get cocky. We've still got a long way to go." With the immediate threat behind them, the dead enders settled into the familiar rhythm of survival. Each second felt like a borrowed moment, a stolen breath from the jaws of fate that constantly loomed just out of sight. "Quarren's map won us this round," Thowrick said, a rare note of gratitude in his voice as he glanced at the glowing data cubes. "We owe him 1 or 10. Maybe we'll pay him back," Kira suggested, "once we figure out how to not die in the process." Jax leaned back, his posture relaxed despite the adrenaline that still hummed in their veins. one step at a time. Isn't that our motto? Thalric nodded, the weight of their escape easing into a determined resolve. One step, one escape, one more chance to fight another day. With the stars as their guide and the universe as their battleground, the dead Enders pressed onward, ready to face whatever came next with the same reckless determination that had brought them this far. Whatever else lay in wait, they'd tackle it as they always had, together, with a grin, a quip, and a stubborn refusal to surrender. And if the universe had anything to say about it, well, they were ready to talk back. The chaos in the cockpit had downgraded to a steady hum of anxiety, though that might just have been the constant drone of the vessel's ancient engines. Thalric stood at the helm, the weight of impending doom pressing down like a black hole on his shoulders. Escape had seemed so tantalizingly possible minutes ago, but now the walls were closing in with the inevitability of a bad haircut. "Well," Kira said, her voice cutting through the tense silence like a laser scalpel, "we're royally screwed." "You're such a ray of sunshine," Thalric muttered, squinting at the incoming ships on the scanner. "They've got us boxed in tighter than a miser's wallet," and Luskar's voice was the uninvited guest at this particularly grim party. Jax, ever the optimist in a world full of cynics, was lounging at his station like he'd just discovered the ship's seat warmers worked for the first time. He grinned, that same devil-may-care grin that had gotten them into and out of more trouble than Thalric cared to count. "Hey, maybe they'll trip over their own shoelaces. Space doesn't have shoelaces," Kira pointed out. "Oh, do you mind?" Thalric snapped, running a hand through his hair. "I'm trying to have a mental breakdown here." Archivist Quarren was unusually silent, probably off in his corner of the universe, dictating another chapter of their miserable lives to whatever eldritch record-keeping system he used. Thalric imagined it involved a lot of antennae waving and ominous clicking noises, but that was a problem for a less immediate moment. Luskar's voice oozed through the comms again, a serpent slithering through static. "I do admire your tenacity, dead Enders. Almost makes this too easy." Thalric flicked off the transmission with a sharp stab of his finger. "Someone should tell him he's not getting his security deposit back." Kira's fingers danced over the navigation console, though it had long since stopped being cooperative. "I've got nothing. Every escape route is blocked. We're like sardines in a can. With guns. Space sardines with guns," Jax corrected. "There's a comic book idea if we survive." "We won't," Thalric reminded him, the words tasting like ash. As if the universe decided that wasn't dark enough, the ship's lights dimmed for a moment before flickering back to life. Thalric smacked the console with the palm of his hand. "Come on, you piece of junk, not now." Just as the impending gloom threatened to consume them, the comms crackled again, but this time it wasn't Luskar's smug drawl. It was a transmission from one of their own, a scout ship that had been running interference. "Dead Enders, do you copy?" "This is Thalric," he replied, because formalities were about as useful as a screen door on a spaceship at this point. "Got a little something that might tickle your fancy," the scout's voice came through, and Thalric could almost hear the grin. "Found a weak spot in their formation. Could be your ticket out." Hope was a dangerous thing, but desperate times called for clutching at straws like a drowning man. "Finally, some good news," Jax said, cracking his knuckles in anticipation. "Send us the details," Kira snapped, her tone all business now, optimism creeping into her usually skeptical demeanor. As the data came through, the burden on Thalric's shoulders lightened ever so slightly. It wasn't a reprieve, but it was a chance. And in their line of work, a chance was almost as good as a miracle. "Kira," Thalric said, turning to his navigator, "plot us a course through that weak spot. Let's show these bastards what happens when you leave a back door open." "Copy that," Kira replied, her fingers already orchestrating a complex dance over the controls. Jax leaned back, folding his hands behind his head. "I take it this means we're not surrendering." Thalric flashed a grin that was more teeth than humor. "Surrender's for losers and the technically dead." "You know," Jax said, "we could write a self-help book, How Not to Die in Space, a guide by the dead Enders. First chapter, Don't follow our example, Kira added, her tone dry as space dust. The ship shuddered again, a reminder that the enemy wasn't about to let them slip away without a fight. But the dead Enders had never backed down before, and they weren't about to start now. Thalric's heart pounded in his chest, a relentless drumbeat that matched the rhythm of the chaos outside. It was a familiar sensation, the kind that came with skirting the edges of oblivion. He'd learned long ago that fear was just another companion on this journey, one that sat in the passenger seat and criticized your driving. "Everyone brace yourselves," he warned, because it seemed like the right thing to say, even if they were all used to this kind of reckless maneuvering by now. The engines roared with a defiant surge, the ship responding to Jax's coaxing like an old warhorse that still had a few tricks up its metal sleeves. As they rocketed toward the weak spot in the enemy's formation, Thalric felt a grim satisfaction. It was fitting, really, that they'd find their salvation in a flaw someone else had overlooked. With Kira's careful guidance, they threaded the needle, slipping through the enemy's lines with a grace that bordered on the miraculous. The technocracy ships were too slow to react, their encircling net unraveling just enough to let the dead Enders slip through unscathed. "See," Jax crowed, reveling in the victory. "Who said you can't teach an old rust bucket new tricks?" "Don't jinx it," Thalric warned, though he couldn't help but smile. As the ship burst free of the blockade, the stars stretching out before them in an endless tapestry, Thalric allowed himself a rare moment of relief. They'd done it. Against all odds and common sense, they'd pulled off another escape. "We're clear," Kira confirmed, though her voice held a note of disbelief. "Well, I'll be damned," Thalric said, his voice tinged with awe. "We actually did it. Never doubted us for a second," Jax lied, kicking his feet up on the console. "Right," Thalric replied, but he didn't bother calling him on it. They'd earned this moment of triumph, however fleeting it might be. As they sailed through the void, the distant stars twinkling with indifference, Thalric couldn't shake the feeling that they were living on borrowed time. The universe had a way of catching up with you, and he'd much rather be the one setting the pace. "We should keep moving," he said eventually, the weight of leadership settling back onto his shoulders. "The technocracy won't be happy about us slipping through their fingers." "They never are," Kira replied, but her smile was a balm against the ever-present tension. Quarren's voice finally broke the silence, a soft hum in the background. "Your actions shall be chronicled, a testament to the resilience of humanity." "Great," Thalric said, sarcasm dripping from his words. "We're in a history book written by a giant alien bug. You've always wanted to be famous," Jax pointed out. Thalric sighed, shaking his head. "Not like this." They continued on, the ship's engines purring like a tired but satisfied beast. For the moment, at least, they were free. But freedom was a precarious thing, always hanging in the balance between chance and choice. With the immediate threat behind them, it was time to regroup, reassess, and figure out the next step in their never-ending journey through a universe that seemed determined to see them dead. As the silence stretched out, broken only by the hum of the ship and the occasional beep of a console, Thalric allowed himself to relax, just a little. It was a luxury he couldn't afford often, but they'd earned it. "Anyone got any ideas for what we do next?" Thalric asked, knowing full well that nobody ever had a plan that stretched beyond don't die. "Keep running, keep fighting, keep surviving," Kira replied, shrugging as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "Same as always, then," Jax said, his grin as infectious as ever. "Same as always," Thalric agreed, feeling a sense of camaraderie that made the uncertainty of their future just a little more bearable. And so they continued on, a ragtag crew of misfits and survivors, navigating a universe that cared little for their plight. But that was fine by them. They'd make their own path, carving their story out of the cosmos with wit, grit, and a stubborn refusal to give up. After all, they were the dead Enders, and they weren't done living yet. The vessel wheezed onward, a tin can on the brink of a cosmic aneurysm. Thalric's fingers danced over the control panel, trying to maintain the semblance of authority while hoping no one noticed the sweat glistening on his brow. He caught a glimpse of Kira through the cockpit's dim lighting, her eyes glued to the navigation console like it held the secrets to eternal life, or at least a quick exit. "All right, folks," he began, trying to sound inspirational but coming off more like a motivational speaker with a drinking problem. "We've got a weak spot to exploit. Think of it as the technocracy's equivalent of a wardrobe malfunction. Ah, finally, a reason to stop thinking about our imminent deaths," Jax chimed in, stretching as if they were about to take a leisurely stroll through a minefield. "Focus, Jax," Kira snapped, though her lips twitched with the hint of a smile. "I'd like to live long enough to hear you run out of dumb jokes. Might take a while," Thaurik said, flashing a grin that was pure gallows humor. In the corner, archivist Quarren was still humming along, antennae twitching in what Thaurik assumed was either excitement or gas. "The technocracy believes in absolutes. Exploiting chaos, ironically, is our greatest strength." "Great. So we're playing a game of cosmic poker with the universe's worst moral philosophers," Jax said, lining up another joke like he was aiming to win a prize. Thaurik pulled up the tactical readouts from their scout ship. The weak spot in the enemy formation was like a black eye in a sea of pristine armor. "They'd need precision, guts, and probably a miracle to punch through. So here's the plan," Thaurik said, gesturing at the screen. "We hit 'em hard, hit 'em fast, and pray they are too busy picking up their teeth to notice us slipping through. You know, for a guy who hates gambling, you sure love high stakes," Kira observed, still tapping away at the navigation console like it owed her money. Thaurik shrugged. "Desperation's just luck with a hangover. Isn't that right, Jax?" "Thank you for quoting my genius," Jax replied, lounging like a man who had never met a consequence he couldn't dodge. The comms crackled to life once more, this time with a voice that wasn't Luskar's. A grizzled voice, one that sounded like it gargled gravel for breakfast. "Dead Enders, you copy that sweet spot. We're counting on you to make the first move." "Copy that," Thaurik responded, his voice a mix of resolve and sarcasm. "We're making this up as we go along, just like every other successful plan. The strategy was simple in concept, suicidal in execution. The Dead Enders would punch through the weak spot, sow chaos within the technocracy ranks, and hope the ensuing pandemonium would buy them a window to escape the sector. It wasn't much of a plan, but when the universe constantly tried to set you on fire, you took what you could get." "All right, Kira," Thaurik said, "punch in the vectors. It's time to see if this bucket can still kick." Kira's fingers flew over the controls, and the vessel groaned as its engines powered up, sounding like they were protesting the very idea of functional flight. "Vectors locked. Let's give them hell." Hell was a place that hungered for their particular brand of chaos, and they were more than happy to oblige. As the vessel surged forward, the stars outside blurred into streaks of light, an illusion of progress in a universe determined to see them end up as cosmic debris. Thaurik braced himself as the ship bucked and shuddered, the hull creaking under the strain. Every part of the vessel seemed to scream in protest, a cacophony of impending doom. "Hey, ship," Jax said, patting the console like it was a stubborn mule. "You hold together and I'll throw in a free oil change. Deal?" Thaurik smirked despite himself. "If we survive, I'll personally polish its hull." Archivist Quarren, ever the observer, remarked, "Your vessel's integrity is as questionable as your strategy." "Thanks for the vote of confidence," Thaurik muttered, adjusting their course with a finesse born of desperation and caffeine. The weak spot loomed ahead like an invitation to disaster. The enemy ships were close enough that Thaurik could practically feel their sensors crawling over his skin. The technocracy vessels bristled with weaponry, all grace and menace, and it was only a matter of time before they realized something was amiss. "Prepare to engage," Thaurik ordered, his voice steeling with determination. "Jax, I want every ounce of speed this heap can muster." "Aye, Captain," Jax replied with mock formality, fingers dancing over his console. The vessel jerked forward, thrumming with barely contained power. Thaurik's heart raced in time with the engines, a synchrony of impending catastrophe. The first line of technocracy ships opened fire, streaks of energy lancing through the void. The Dead Ender's vessel twisted and rolled, slipping through the barrage with a nimbleness that defied its battered exterior. "They're onto us," Kira announced, her voice calm despite the chaos. Thalric gritted his teeth, focusing every ounce of his will on the task at hand. "Let's show them what unpredictable really means." The ship danced through the enemy formation, weaving between blasts with reckless abandon. The technocracy, rigid in their strategies, struggled to adapt to the chaos unfolding in their midst. Each maneuver was a roll of the dice, a gamble that left them teetering on the edge of annihilation. But with every daring swerve, they sowed confusion and disorder, the technocracy ships faltering as they tried to compensate. "They're getting sloppy," Jax reported, a note of admiration in his voice. "Looks like they didn't plan for crazy." Lesson 1 in How Not to Die in Space. "Always plan for crazy," Thalric quipped, a grim smile tugging at his lips. The weak spot was just ahead, a chink in the technocracy's armor, and Thalric seized the moment. "Kira, now!" The vessel surged forward, engines roaring with a defiant challenge. They punched through the gap, the ship vibrating with the strain of holding together. For a moment time seemed to stretch, the silence in the cockpit a stark contrast to the whirling chaos outside. Thalric held his breath, waiting for the inevitable retribution. Then the comms erupted with overlapping voices, technocracy officers barking orders, confusion evident in their clipped tones. The chaos they'd unleashed was buying them precious seconds. "Yes," Jax exclaimed, pumping a fist in the air. "They're too busy playing whack-a-mole to stop us." "Don't celebrate just yet," Thalric cautioned, though he couldn't deny the thrill of their audacity. Kira steered them through the thick of the confusion, the technocracy ships struggling to regroup. The battlefield was a tangled mess, and in that mess, the Dead Enders found their sanctuary. "Keep us moving," Thalric ordered, every fiber of his being focused on maintaining their momentum. The technocracy was scrambling, their systematic approach unraveling in the face of such unorthodox tactics. But they were still a formidable foe, and their retaliation wouldn't be long in coming. "We've got a window," Kira reported, her tone professional but laced with victory. "We'll take it," Thalric said, the tension in his voice easing for the first time in what felt like forever. "Let's get the hell out of here." The vessel careened through the chaos, engines pushed to their limits as they clawed their way toward freedom. Behind them, the technocracy ships were a swarm of angry wasps, trying to rebuild their shattered formation. "Looks like they're not happy with us leaving the party early," Jax said, his words brimming with dark amusement. "They'll get over it," Thalric replied, his grip on the controls steady. Eventually, as they broke free of the battle zone, the stars emerged once more, a welcome sight against the backdrop of chaos. The Dead Enders had done the impossible, slipping through the technocracy's grasp with nothing but nerve and a well-timed dose of insanity. The comms crackled again, this time with the scout's gravelly voice. "Nice work, Dead Enders. You've earned yourselves a drink." Thalric exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing ever so slightly. "I'll take that drink and make it a double," he said, a note of satisfaction in his voice. "Copy that," the scout replied, the humor in his voice a strange balm amidst the madness. Thalric leaned back in his seat, the adrenaline slowly ebbing away. They were free for now, but freedom was a fleeting thing in a universe as hostile as theirs. "Let's put some distance between us and them," Thalric suggested, already thinking ahead. "They're not going to forget this little stunt anytime soon." Kira nodded, setting a course that would take them far from the technocracy's immediate reach. "Done." "But what about long-term?" "Same as always," Thalric said, his voice tinged with weary resolve. "We keep moving, keep fighting, keep surviving." Jax leaned back, a grin still playing on his lips. "And keep being the biggest pain in the universe's ass." Thalric chuckled, shaking his head. "Exactly." As the vessel sailed deeper into the void, leaving the chaos behind, Thalric let himself relax, if only for a brief, stolen moment. They'd pulled off the impossible, but the universe was far from done with them, and that was just fine. They weren't done with the universe either. "So, anyone up for a game of cards?" Jax asked, breaking the silence with his irrepressible cheer. Thalric groaned. "As if I need another reason to lose my sanity." "Come on, it's tradition," Jax insisted. Kira sighed, though there was a hint of indulgence in her tone. "Fine, but if you cheat, I'm throwing you out the airlock." "Wouldn't dream of it," Jax replied, all innocence and mischief. Thalric watched his crew, a ragtag band of misfits and survivors, and felt a rare sense of contentment. They may have been the universe's punching bag, but they were still standing. And as long as they were, they'd keep laughing in the face of doom. After all, they were the dead enders, and their story was far from over. Thalric flexed his fingers, feeling every joint pop in protest. It was the universe's way of reminding him he was still alive, though the odds were perpetually against it. The cockpit, dimly lit and cramped, felt like a coffin with a view. If they were going to survive this latest debacle, he figured they should at least have a good laugh about it. "Kira, what's our status?" he asked, trying to sound like he had a plan. Spoiler alert, he didn't. She glanced up from the navigation console, her expression a blend of focus and the sort of weariness that comes from years of dodging death. "We're a bad decision away from cosmic confetti, Captain." "Ah, just your average Tuesday," Thalric replied. "Jax, how's that engine looking? Still in one piece, or are we about to add explosive decompression to our list of hobbies?" Jax, ever the optimist, grinned. "Relax, Captain. If it blows, you won't have to worry about polishing the hull." Quarren's antennae twitched in what Thalric had come to recognize as either amusement or panic. "The probability of our current trajectory resulting in annihilation is approximately 42%. 42%, Thalric echoed. "Why, those are the best odds we've had all week." He steeled his nerves, eyes scanning the array of blinking lights and screens before him. On the scanner, the technocracy fleet was a disciplined line, a wall of order just waiting to fall apart at the seams. All they had to do was pull the right thread. "Luskar's still chirping in our comms," Jax noted, the static-laced voice of their persistent antagonist barely audible over the din. "Let him chirp," Thalric said, confidence a fragile veneer. "Let's give him something to really squawk about." The moment had come, the culmination of their reckless gambit. A perfectly timed maneuver was all that stood between them and a technocratic breakdown. The dead enders had no illusions of grandeur. They were the ugly stepchildren of the universe, but they had one trick the technocracy didn't: unpredictability. "Kira, evasive pattern Omega. Let's show them what chaos looks like." "On it," Kira replied, her fingers dancing over the controls with the grace of someone who'd spent years betting her life on broken odds and winning. The ship lurched, engines roaring like the universe's angriest cat. They veered hard to port, a sudden, erratic movement that screamed unpredictability. The technocracy, with their love of order and precision, wouldn't know what to make of it. As expected, Luskar's voice crackled through the comms with irritation. "Dead enders, what the hell are you up to?" Thalric smirked. "Just giving your boys a little dance lesson." "Hope you're taking notes." The ship spun, a wild pirouette through the void, its path a testament to the crew's collective insanity. The technocracy ships, rigid in formation, struggled to adapt to the new threat. Their orderly ranks crumbled, confusion spreading like a virus. "Look at them scramble," Jax said, barely containing his laughter. "Like a bunch of cats chasing a laser pointer." "Don't mock the cats, Jax," Thalric cautioned with faux solemnity. "They have claws." The scanner lit up with the chaotic movements of the enemy fleet, their once impenetrable formation now a tangled knot. The dead enders had done it. They'd turned the technocracy's strength into a weakness, revealing the chink in their armor, a total inability to handle the unexpected. "Thalric, they are regrouping," Kira warned, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Let them try," he replied, feeling the adrenaline of victory taste like bitter coffee. "We've got them exactly where we want them, where they don't want to be." The The technocracy ships struggled to realign, their efforts hamstrung by the chaos the dead enders had so artfully unleashed. The battlefield was a living testament to the power of unpredictability, a chaotic symphony of lights and explosions. Quarren observed the unfolding pandemonium with a detached air, antennae twitching in curiosity. Fascinating. Their adaptation rate is significantly slower than anticipated. Maybe they're just shy, Jax quipped, grinning like a maniac. Or maybe they've finally realized that the universe doesn't play fair. The comm sputtered, Luskar's voice straining with frustration. You think you've won, dead enders. This isn't over. Really? Thalric replied, raising an eyebrow though Luskar couldn't see it. Because it looks pretty over from where I'm sitting. The technocracy fleet was a mess, their ranks broken and communication lines in disarray. It was the sort of victory that tasted like irony, a ragtag crew of misfits outsmarting a well-oiled machine by being the loose gears. Jax, punch up the engines. Let's make our exit before they pull themselves together, Thalric ordered, a sense of triumph lacing his words. Consider us gone, Jax replied, fingers flying over his console. And if any of you see Luskar on the way out, be sure to flip him off for me. Kira steered them through the fray, the ship vibrating with the effort of holding itself together. They slipped through the cracks in the technocracy's defenses, a shadow moving against the backdrop of chaos they'd created. Looks like you've managed to scrape our way out of another fine mess, Captain, Kira remarked, her tone a mix of relief and disbelief. Ah, but it's what I do best, Thalric replied with a shrug, though his heart still pounded like a caged beast. Get into messes, get out of them, and make it look like I planned the whole damn thing. The open void loomed ahead, a comforting emptiness away from the battle they just left in shambles. The stars, indifferent to their plight, twinkled like distant promises of more trouble to come. Freedom tastes like burnt circuits, Jax declared, leaning back in his seat with a satisfied grin. Don't get too comfortable, Thalric warned, though his eyes glinted with the thrill of survival. The universe is always watching, waiting to throw its next punch. Quarren hummed, their gaze distant. Perhaps, but for now, we have prevailed against the odds. Thalric nodded, allowing himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The technocracy had underestimated them, and that underestimation had been their undoing. The dead enders had proven that adaptability, insanity, and just a touch of luck could topple even the most disciplined adversary. So, what now? Kira asked, setting a course that would take them far from this latest fiasco. We keep doing what we do best, Thalric replied, his voice resolute. Survive, adapt, and piss off everyone in the process. Jax chuckled, the sound like gravel on a vibrating sheet of metal. And maybe play a little cards along the way. Of course, Thalric said, glancing at his crew, his family, in one of those rare, sentimental moments he'd never admit to. After all, what's life without a few games? Just be sure to keep your poker face, Captain, Kira teased, a rare smile tugging at her lips. As the vessel slipped further into the void, leaving the technocracy's ruined pride behind, Thalric let himself relax, if only for a moment. They'd done the impossible, and in the process, they'd reminded the universe of one simple truth. Humans, for all their flaws, were a force to be reckoned with. So, Jax said, breaking the comfortable silence, what do you think? A toast to our latest stunt. A toast, Thalric agreed, raising an imaginary glass, to chaos, unpredictability, and the next mess we get ourselves into. The crew joined in, their laughter echoing through the cockpit like a beacon in the dark, proof that even in the harshest of universes they could find moments of levity. As the stars stretched out before them, Thalric allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. They were the dead enders, the scrappy survivors of a universe that seemed hell-bent on their destruction. And yet, despite everything they endured, their story wasn't over, not by a long shot. And as long as they had each other, and perhaps a little luck, they'd continue to defy the odds, one reckless adventure at a time. Thalric leaned back in his chair, the creak of old metal somehow reassuring in the aftermath of chaos. The cockpit was still dim, the smells of burnt circuits and stressed hydraulics mingling with the stale air of their beleaguered tin can of a ship. He let out a long breath, the kind that felt like deflating a life raft you weren't entirely sure you were done with. "Well," he said, crossing his arms and glancing at his crew, "that was another lovely jaunt through Hellhole Central." Kira was still at the console, fingers flicking over the controls like a concert pianist trying to coax one last tune out of a battered piano. She shot him a look, half amused, half ready to strangle him. "Next time maybe we can do it without turning our ship into a space piñata," Jax chuckled, tossing a greasy rag onto the floor. "Where's the fun in that? If we left the technocracy with both their pride and their ships intact, they'd get complacent." "Can't have that," Thalric agreed with mock solemnity. "Our job is to make sure they never sleep well again." Quarren, always calm, always observing, chimed in. "The probability of them having nightmares about us is significantly high." "Good," Thalric said, rubbing his hands together. "I like being someone else's nightmare for a change." The archive they had fought so hard to save loomed in the distance, a hulking shadow on the scanner. While the technocracy might have had their playbooks, the dead Enders had something better, a stubborn refusal to lie down and die. He stood and walked over to the small viewport, staring out at the stars. They were still out there, after all, twinkling like they hadn't just outwitted a force capable of reducing entire worlds to ash. "What's the damage, Kira?" "We saved it," Kira replied, her voice tinged with satisfaction. "Mostly. A few sections are still smoldering, but the important stuff, still intact." "Mostly is good enough for me," Thalric said, turning back to face his crew. "It's like I always say, if it isn't on fire, it's a win." Jax raised an eyebrow. "Pretty sure you say that about things that are on fire too." "Details," Thalric replied with a wave of his hand. The comm system crackled to life again, but this time it wasn't Luskar's smug taunts. This was a voice they hadn't heard before, calm and measured. "Dead Enders, this is Archivist Quarren. Are you receiving?" Thalric glanced at Quarren, who was sitting right there, antennae twitching. "You chatting with us from somewhere else, Quarren?" "Different Quarren," the Quarren in the cockpit clarified, antennae twitching in what might have been embarrassment. "Common name among Arcturans." "Right," Thalric said, flipping the comm switch. "Receiving you loud and clear, Archivist. You owe us one hell of a thank you note." The voice on the other end chuckled, a dry, raspy sound. "I believe you've more than earned it, Captain Thalric. We owe you our gratitude and our lives." "Add it to our tab," Thalric replied. "We've got quite the collection of IOU from people who'd rather not see us blasted into space dust." "Consider it done," Archivist Quarren said. "The technocracy's defeat here today will be a beacon for others." Thalric winced at the word beacon, but let it slide. "It's a start. Maybe they'll start realizing their iron grip isn't as ironclad as they thought." Jax grinned, leaning back with his hands behind his head. "And maybe we'll get a nice vacation out of it, somewhere with a sun that doesn't want to kill us." "Dream big, Jax," Kira said, shaking her head. "Dream big." The comms went silent and the ship settled back into its usual rhythm, the hum of engines, the occasional creak as the hull adjusted to the pressures of space. Thalric sank back into his chair, feeling the weight of their latest escapade settle into his bones. "Feels like we've been doing this forever," he murmured, not quite to himself. "Forever is about right," Kira replied, her voice softening. "But hey, at least we're still kicking." "Yeah," Thalric said, a tired smile tugging at his lips. "Still kicking." They had done it. Against all odds, they'd saved the archive, sent the technocracy packing, and lived to tell the tale. But victory, as sweet as it was, tasted a little like failure too, the kind of failure that reminded you you'd never quite escaped the universe's cosmic joke. "Think they'll remember us, Captain?" Jax asked, breaking into his thoughts. "They'd better," Thalric replied, a flicker of mischief in his eyes. "We've got a reputation to maintain." The stars beyond the viewport were still as indifferent as ever, but today they seemed just a little bit brighter. The dead enders had faced down the darkness and come out the other side, a little more battered, a little more scarred, but still here. And that was something worth smiling about, even in a universe that seemed hell-bent on proving them wrong. "So what's next?" Kira asked, settling into her seat. "Next," Thalric echoed, glancing around at his crew. "Next we do what we always do." "And what's that?" Jax asked, his tone teasing. Thalric leaned forward, his grin a sly, defiant thing. "We survive, we adapt. And we make sure everyone knows just how annoying we can be." "Sounds like a plan," Kira said, a rare, genuine smile lighting up her face. "To survival," Jax said, raising an imaginary glass once again. "To chaos," Thalric added with a nod. "And to making the universe a slightly more interesting place," Kira finished, her voice a soft, hopeful note in the silence. As they drifted away from the archive, leaving the chaos of battle behind, Thalric let himself savor the moment. The dead enders had made their mark, shown the universe what they were capable of, and lived to fight another day. And somewhere out there, the technocracy would be nursing their bruises, plotting their next move. But for today, at least, the dead enders had won. With a final glance at his crew, Thalric settled back into his chair, feeling the familiar comfort of worn leather and hard-won trust. They were still here, still together, and that was enough, for now. "Well," Thalric said, breaking the silence, "who's up for a game of cards?" Kira chuckled, shaking her head. "You're on, Captain, but no cheating this time." "Wouldn't dream of it," Thalric replied, smirking. "Sure you wouldn't," Jax said, rolling his eyes. "But count me in." The ship hummed beneath them, a steady, reassuring presence as they drifted through the void. The stars stretched out before them, a promise of more adventures, more challenges, and more chaos to come. And as long as they had each other, Thalric knew they'd be ready for whatever the universe threw their way, because they were the dead enders and they weren't done yet. Not by a long shot.